He's level 9.
Hey, you gonna play with us?
Well, no, I can't.
A quartet of college students are really into a role-playing game, to the point where it looks as though one of them has become buried in the part.
And possibly the loss of life in the process.
It's a television film that's not really meant for the people who enjoyed pen and paper games, but it's more for their parents who are absolutely shit scared about role-playing games, like the one shown in Mazes and Monsters.
Mazes and Monsters?
Right. You know how to play it?
My kids play it. I know the game.
Well.
Mazes and Monsters was a 1982 television movie about some kids playing a game that was very much like Dungeons and Dragons, but of course wasn't Dungeons and Dragons. And rather than just being a light-hearted romp about people playing a role-playing game or an action-adventure set in a fantasy world, this is more of a melodramatic thriller pitched at concerned parents, something that looked at the dangers of role-playing games. Or, as old Slick would say,
what is it with these lousy rat bastard kids?
I don't know, Slick. What is so dang wrong about these kids meeting up with their friends and playing a game with dice? Was Dungeons & Dragons just dangerous, or was it devil worship, or was it deadly? Though I guess if you asked somebody who was really into Dungeons & Dragons when they were in high school, they'd probably just admit that it was less deadly and more wedgy.
Do we have a 4th player?
Well, I've typed up the notice, so I'm gonna put it up in the bulletin board.
4 teens with difficult relationships with their parents meet up at Grant University to play the role-playing game Mazes and Monsters. JJ's mother is an intense famous decorator who's just made his bedroom look like something out of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Daniel's parents want him to be a big wheel in the computer industry, while he'd rather be off designing video games. Kate's parents are divorced. Robbie had left his last school after having played too much Mazes and Monsters, and his parents are the picture of privileged happiness. His dad is terminally disappointed in everything, his son, his wife, and the size of his role in this movie. Robbie's mum is a day drinker, also a night drinker, and somehow a sleep drinker. Robbie, who's trying very hard to stay on the Monsters and Mazes wagon, has his determination tested by the power of nagging. At a party, Kate, Daniel and JJ descend upon Robbie, and through the power of pestering, the quartet will eventually agree to play Mazes and Monsters together. All 4 of the players are a picture of non-socially awkward nerds, yet they're all isolated to a degree. Robbie and Kate quickly fall in love and become a couple.
Oh, a double bed.
Daniel says how hard it is to be ridiculously good-looking, and child genius JJ just wears a lot of weird hats and talks to his minor bird. I assume the topic of conversation goes beyond hats.
And Merlin hates it too, don't you?
Birds can't talk.
Coward.
JJ, who's younger than everybody else, is not all that happy in life and decides that he's going to make a splash by offing himself in the nearby Pequod Caverns. Except instead of taking his own life, he's inspired to invent live-action role-playing. Now, there's no linkage there. He invites his friends for a LARP session in the cavern where, for some reason, Robbie sees a monster that he kills.
All right now. I've slain the core.
The gang had a great time, though Robbie is somehow different, where he will break up with Kate. He has become convinced that his destiny is to find a character called Hall, which coincidentally is the name of Robbie's brother who ran away years ago. Meanwhile, Kate and Daniel grow closer and become a couple. Robbie has become so disassociated with what's going on around him that he barely notices. For him, there's the lure of those cabins and to find this guy Hall. Robbie now believes himself to be his game character Pardieu and sees visions of Hall standing in a drain who implores Robbie to head to the 2 towers.
The most frightening monsters are the ones that exist in our minds.
When Robbie goes missing, his friends can't find him, and pretty soon the cops come looking. The kids all deny that they were playing Mazes and Monsters, while the detective grills them on their links to Robbie and the game.
One of the players Robbie played with got carried away and killed him.
Robbie turns out to be wandering New York City in a daze, where he thinks a mugger is a monster and possibly even kills him. He calls Kate, finally remembering his own identity, but rather than just sit still and wait for his friends to come and pick him up, he goes and wanders around in some steam tunnels.
Oh, where's my brain? The 2 towers are the Twin Towers, the World Trade Center.
Eventually, Robbie's friends will track him down to the real 2 towers. Robbie makes it to the top of the World Trade Center.
Kate, why can't I remember?
And then we cut to a few months later, and the 3 not-so friends visit Robbie at his family's country home. And while his mother says, oh, he's doing okay, Robbie's personality is well and truly gone, replaced by that of Pardieu.
Shall we not begin the quest?
The gang humour him with one last Mazes and Monsters adventure.
And so we played the game until the sun began to set and all the monsters were dead.
Mazes and Monsters, if you haven't worked it out by now, isn't a fun romp that turned a D&D campaign into an adventure series, but a drama about kids having psychotic breaks because of the game. It's a melodrama aimed at parents and could possibly be described as a primetime after-school special, a movie that no parent of nerds could afford to miss, especially if their teenage children started randomly using words like prithee, wouldst and liege in conversations about what breakfast cereal they wanted, as in, prithee, wouldst thou purchase a box of caramel chocky flakes, my liege? Dungeons and Dragons was a thing in the early 80s, but not just any old thing, it was quite a big thing. In it, a dungeon master created an adventure or campaign and would lead players through the story, whereby each character had specific stats, and the success or failure of every choice made by the player for their characters was determined by rolling a die. It was originally created by Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson in the early 70s, and it found favour with mainly younger people who read and loved fantasy novels. And of course it gave nerds something social to do.
Your fate is in my hands.
With D&D, people could get really into it, where they were playing a role in a game. Oh, that's a snappy name for a game genre. The role-playing game or RPG aspect of D&D was a bit of fun that gave kids something to do, especially if they didn't want to do all of the things that old Slick insisted that people should do in their spare time.
Mazes and Monsters is a far-out game.
As a game it was, like my elderly attack chihuahua Bubbles, mostly harmless. But like anything, some kids got really into it.
Where these people deal with problems in their lives by acting them out.
To outsiders, it was this mysterious and scary thing, almost a cult, a vaguely satanic thing, and that was bound to get some people up in arms about the potential effects of rolling a 20-sided die. Well, the effect was the kids were just having some fun, but ooh, now that we've gotten over rock music, Slick and folks like him needed a new thing that they knew nothing about that caused no harm whatsoever to get up in arms over.
I am the maze controller, the god of this universe I have created, the absolute authority.
Panic over Dungeons and Dragons and similar role-playing games in some circles verged on hysterical, where according to Slick and his ilk, harmless fun was apparently a crime against humanity and fission.
There might be a loss of distinction between reality and fantasy.
Mazes and Monsters was based on Rona Jaffe's novel of the same name, which was a fictional take on stories of a player with problems. In the late 70s, a student with various problems and addictions had gone into some steam tunnels to commit suicide, but instead ran away and hid from his family. Because he'd also played RPGs, that was latched onto as the biggest cause of the young man's problems.
Take it easy, all right?
The idea that D&D players LARPing in tunnels and going missing or even dying was something that stuck in some people's memories, even if that story was later debunked by a private investigator who looked into the original missing student. He'd not actually died in the tunnels, but had died by his own hand several years after the original incident.
When you last saw him, was he depressed or moody?
Irony of ironies, Jaffe's fictional book about a kid who couldn't discern reality from a game was taken by some as evidence. To people like Slick, it was the 20-sided die what done it.
Robbie a doper.
Jaffe's book was a hit, and the rights to a television movie adaptation was snapped up with this 1982 production directed by Stephen Hilliard Stern for CBS. It was mostly made in Canada with a local cast, well, with obviously some Americans, and there was some filming in New York City.
Then you will come to the two towers and be one with the Great Hall.
The biggie was Tom Hanks, then in his mid-20s, and it was one of his earliest starring roles in a film. He'd already been cast in the cross-dressing comedy series Bosom Buddies, and would spend much of the 80s in comedies and lighter films in general, before concentrating on more dramatic roles in the 90s and beyond.
I've had many strange encounters since last we met. A great dragon.
Mazes and Monsters has none of that early Tom Hanks zaniness, and he's got the role that required the most acting of anybody. So he's pretty good in this, being a normal guy who then suddenly has a psychotic break and is never quite the same again.
TJ, what am I doing here?
So he's never really put behind him this obsession with dang fool role-playing games and take up fishing like a real man.
If he's in those caverns, he's dead.
Murray Hamilton is the cop probing into Robbie's disappearance, but at no point does he ever insist on closing down the beaches on the 4th of July. The parents were all played by familiar character actors, including Vera Miles and Anne Francis.
Do you know how many of my clients would give their eye teeth for a Julia Brockway room like this?
But it's the actors playing the kids, Chris Makepeace, Wendy Crewson and David Wallace, who have to carry the film, especially when Hank's character goes missing for a spell.
He's flipped into the game.
Come on.
The acting in this is mostly okay, but it does often veer awfully close to a soap opera style.
I hate it when you drink. I drink to get through the day.
Which probably does suit the material. I mean, it's a familiar story. I mean, we have arguments at family dinners. Somebody always gets up, stands at the window with their backs to us, and tells us how hard it was when he learned that Darren had flunked out of law school to become a wedding DJ.
I was so proud of it.
As a film, it's alright. But I do see the basic premise as a hatchet job. I have no links to Dungeons & Dragons. Every time I ever tried to play, I never got past giving the character a silly name before I lost interest and went and did something else, like going fishing with Slick. That was until he got loaded and drove his pickup truck off a bridge into the bottomless gorge, which ironically enough for Slick, wasn't actually bottomless.
It just doesn't make any sense.
But again, this movie is not aimed at the players of games like Dungeons & Dragons, but at their parents. Is it worth watching Mazes and Monsters?
No.
For the Tom Hanks fans, or if you're the parent of somebody who dabbles in pen and paper role-playing games. It's possibly the first, or at least a very early depiction of live-action role-playing on screen. A hobby that to some seems a bit silly, but then who am I to cast shade?
I'm a holy man. I never kill unless I cannot overcome the monster with reason or spell.
The movie must have had some impact since they ripped off this premise for an episode of the 80s one-season wonder, The Powers of Matthew Starr.
You're gonna need some real magic to get away with this. Oh, I already have.
So, according to this movie, it goes pen and paper role-playing game, live-action role-playing or LARPing, and then psychotic break. See, it's a very linear progression.
Thus warned, shall ye enter?
Aye.
I doubt that I'd ever watch this again, but what I would watch is the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons episode of Community, which does seem to handle the link between mental health and Dungeons & Dragons in a much better way.
Battles, maiming, killing.
Hey, it's all imagination.
Is it?
Truth be told, I'd never heard of Mazes and Monsters and bought this movie blind, and it was totally not what I was expecting. It would be like buying an adult movie called Hot Burning Pants, but instead you find out it's about sexually transmitted infections.
Is it helpful?
The hysteria over the supposed darker side of role-playing games seems to have subsided, especially as those people who were kids in the 80s are now in their 40s, 50s and 60s. They're still playing these games, and without incident. D&D and card games like Magic the Gathering or video games are more popular than ever. But of course, like anything, you can get sucked into it if you have an addictive personality. Man, you should just see our circle of degenerate and debauched fantasy Uno matches. Off the chain.
It won't be a fantasy. It really will be Mazes and Monsters.
Of course, if you're into D&D and you want to decide whether to watch this, I guess you already have the power to decide whether or not to give this a spin. Or you could just watch the D&D episode of Community. If you enjoyed this review, please like and subscribe, leave a comment below, or check out some of our other videos.
Did it bite?
Oh, all birds bite.